Hey folks, we're about to start another episode of Ask Us Anything about electrochemistry. But before we begin, because we have some extra time, there are a few things I'd like to go over first. While we're waiting for the live stream to start, type your question into the chat. The sooner we get your question, the sooner we'll be able to answer it when the live stream starts. We usually try to answer questions in the order that we receive them, but it's definitely possible that we get so many questions that when your question comes up, we're out of time. If you are a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 YouTube member, you do get priority in us answering your question. You also have the opportunity to join us on the stream to either share slides or talk to us in person about your specific electrochemistry research questions. If you are a Tier 1 or Tier 2 member on our YouTube channel, you will find in the community post the link and password to join us on our broadcasting platform. We get a lot of questions about electrochemistry, whether it's through our YouTube comments, webinars, email, phone conversations. We get lots of questions from people about electrochemistry. And sometimes responding to a YouTube comment or trying to describe a cyclic voltammogram over the phone isn't always the easiest way to teach or describe electrochemistry. That's why we created this live stream. In the Ask Us Anything About Electrochemistry live stream, you can ask us any questions you have about electrochemistry, and we can use better tools and take more time to describe some of these electrochemical processes to help you with your research and understanding of electrochemistry. Now, in our time of doing this live stream, we've observed that if you ask a very specific question, we might not be able to answer it. It'll be a little bit too specific for us. On the other side, if you ask a very broad question and you're interested in just a very broad understanding of cyclic voltammetry, we have separate tools, we have other resources to help you. So we do have a YouTube video on cyclic voltammetry, an introduction to the subject. And if you're interested in more of a long-form course on, say, electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, we have a 5-part EIS webinar series for our Tier 2 YouTube members that you can access at any time. Now, if you weren't aware, Pine Research Instrumentation is a company that produces a wide array of high-quality electrochemical research equipment, from potentiostats to electrodes, electrochemical rotators, cells, different types of accessories. Pine Research has been supporting electrochemistry research and teaching for decades. Recently, we have developed new electrochemical simulation software called Aftermath Live. Aftermath Live is an online streaming platform where you can simulate popular electrochemical techniques like cyclic voltammetry. It's a powerful research tool as you might simulate a cyclic voltammogram to support an electrochemical mechanism for your redox reaction that you're studying. But Aftermath Live and cyclic voltammetry simulation is also a very powerful tool when it comes to just learning electrochemistry. In fact, in previous episodes of the live stream, we have used Aftermath Live and our simulation software to answer some of the questions that you have. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can get a 10% discount on your first month of the basic and research editions of Aftermath Live by using the coupon code PINEYouTube10 when you're at checkout. Aftermath Live is a powerful tool and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Go to aftermathlive.com to check it out. Link is in the description below. Our live streams are normally on Fridays from 1 to 3 p.m. They normally last about 2 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. If you miss the live stream, you'll always be able to watch it on our YouTube channel, and in the description we put timestamps for every question that was asked. This way you can look through the description and find the questions that are most relevant to your research and then watch those at your leisure. Also, we apologize in advance if we mispronounce your name. If on a YouTube channel you can put anything you want as a name. It could be a Pokemon, it could be a string of numbers. But if we call you out and we accidentally mispronounce your name, we apologize in advance. Lastly, please do not spam the chat. We've had numerous instances of people either talking about inappropriate things or constantly filling the chat up with some kind of spam. We will remove you if you do that. Let's keep the chat very clean and just talk about electrochemistry. Sometimes it takes a while before we're able to answer your question. So if you keep typing your question into the chat and spam the chat, then we will remove you from the chat. But if it's been a while and we may have forgotten about your question, one message as a gentle reminder is all that's required. All right, I think that's all of the housekeeping things. Now, let's start the live stream.
All right.
Hello, everybody. We're live on the internet. It's been a while.
Yeah, all of 1 week.
It's been 1 week. Well, it's been 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, technically 2 weeks.
But we had 1 week off.
Yeah.
Because it's summertime, and who wants to work in the summer? I mean, let's just be honest, right?
Yeah. People are on vacation.
People are on vacation, including us. Well, mostly it's like work trips, I guess.
Yeah. We were on work trips. And I know we'll probably mention this later during the live stream again, just to remind people. But Neil and I have just talked, and we probably won't have another live stream for almost a month. It won't be until July 11th. Will be the next Friday.
Appears to be the next week that both of us are in the same zip code again, or country, or state, or universe, multiverse. It's a lot of
timeline.
Yeah, there's a lot of workshops and some vacation and some other things, and you know, it's one of those things. It's like the summer is holiday time, and also for us, it's a chance to travel around and
visit you guys.
Visit you, exactly. And shout out to, I was just this week in Middlebury, Vermont, at Middlebury College with Alex Bradar's group. So shout out to Alex Bradar's group if anybody is watching today. It was nice to see you and spend some time with you. I have not been to Middlebury before, and I must say that I found it very fun that half of the drive is on a highway when you can drive like a person, and half of the drive is through roads that probably were built when only horses were walking around in carriages, and they haven't been paved since then, or all of the frost heaves have destroyed the roads, and it was like driving over the surface of the moon. So that's fun.
Half of the drive, huh?
Literally an hour and I drove from New Hampshire because I visited University of New Hampshire. Shout out to Jeff Halpern's group at the University of New Hampshire as well. Thank you all for hosting me on Wednesday. I had a good time. And it's like you drive for an hour and a half up highways, and you get off the highway and you're like, oh, I guess I'm getting close. No, you're not. You're not. You're on like whatever mountain road, and I'm glad that I ruined the brakes on my rental car and not my car. You know, because it's a rental car, so I don't care that it's probably brand new. I don't know what year you get a rental car. It's like it might as well be. Who cares? New. It's probably new.
Yeah, most of them new nowadays.
But after driving through those roads and constantly downhill and then constantly uphill and around hairpin turns like I'm in a NASCAR race or something, I probably took 7 years off the brakes because I'm just like, why I don't know. I didn't have to hit the accelerator for like 45 minutes, and then you're just going downhill forever, you're going over and under mountains. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah,
I guess it was interesting at the very least.
Yeah, and so that was your trip to. That was in New Hampshire, correct?
New Hampshire and Vermont.
New Hampshire and Vermont.
Yes.
Yeah. Last week I was at a battery conference at Tufts. So while we're doing shout outs to all the places we've been to these last 2 weeks, I was at Tufts with Graham Leverick for a battery summer school. So now I know a lot more about batteries. Still have a lot to learn.
Yes.
But I finally had some training, some in depth experience trying to make fake batteries. We didn't use a lot of the dangerous electrolytes that actually work.
I made fake batteries when I was a postdoc. I also made real batteries, but I made fake batteries too. And fake batteries are fun.
Because you can just you don't have to worry about safety precautions as well. Or
That's part of it, and I also don't like safety. However, the main reason is you don't have to use a glove box because
yeah,
glove boxes are just
they're
awful.
rough.
I was telling this to at least one of the groups I was with this past week, but glove boxes are awful. Like I have, reasonably sized hands. Like I don't have like monstrous
Mhm.
Shaquille O'Neal sized hands, but I also don't have petite small hands. I have average sized hands, but glove boxes are made only for Andre the Giant or Shaquille O'Neal. He's an NBA basketball player for those, or he was. Well, he's retired now, but he's like 7'3", and his hand is probably bigger than my entire face.
Yeah.
And he is the only person for whom glove box gloves were made. They are bigger than every human being alive except professional basketball players, which seems a curious choice because I don't know how much research they're doing these days. They're probably playing basketball, and it's ridiculous. And so it just makes it difficult to maneuver small coin cells with giant gloved hands, and you're like trying to put stuff together and not short the whole thing apart because you're using big fumbling fingers. You know what I mean? It's it's a nightmare.
And coin cells, it's like, oh, I had to use like little like clippers and stuff to
try using tweezers with giant gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my life in graduate school. It was not easy.
No, that's rough. That's rough. I learned a lot of stuff. That was good.
I'm glad that you have, and I did spectroscopy stuff when I was on my trip. So it's like I'm learning some of your world.
Yeah.
Which is to say that I know almost nothing about it, but I played with a spectrometer, so that's something. And then you're learning about batteries, so like
that's your world.
We're like
we're learning each other's
world.
Stuff,
exactly.
Which you kind of have to do because
we need that, like the more you know, like to go behind us. But yes. Okay, well, we are waiting for some questions if anybody has any, and if you don't, then I have other things I can do today, so I'll just leave. Yeah. But until then, there was this question that I think this person asked in a comment like more than a month ago.
Almost.
We
just never got to
it's a rare that we get to questions because we get so many live, but we have a rare moment now where there's a little bit of a lull before the deluge of questions comes in. So I'm going to try to talk about this a little bit. And if you do see this Nature Bound 22, apologies that it's been so long. And we did say we were going to get to it in episode probably 15 at this point, and it's like 104, 103. So as these things go, we're well-meaning, but frankly, we just get so many live, and then electrochemistry answers take longer than 8 seconds, and time gets away from us. It happens. But this person asked, how can I measure a system with low impedance at a specific voltage? If I use potentiostatic impedance, then I get a massive current. But if I use galvanostatic, then I cannot control the voltage. How can I bypass this issue? Is it an issue at all? Okay, so I'm actually just going to tackle this by showing you one slide from a webinar I have done to kind of hammer this point home while I have the chance. But the other part is to just address the last part of your question first, which is is this an issue at all? In some sense, yes, and in some sense, no. And so what I mean is if the situation you have described is what you're observing, then yes, it is an issue. You're not like crazy. You know what I mean? You're certainly in a situation where you are going to have trouble no matter what you do. But in a lot of cases, the systems in which you have very low impedance that either suggests or necessitates the use of galvanostatic impedance, the problem is not as dire for a reason I will explain shortly. So there's a teaser for you. But for now, let me share some slides from one of my previous webinars on impedance for just the general viewing audience, I guess, to illustrate kind of the spirit of your question, if I will. So when you're talking about impedance, there's two kinds, potentiostatic and galvanostatic, right? Potentiostatic is where you input potential and you get output of current. Galvanostatic is when your input is current and the output is potential. And I'm sharing, right?
Yes.
Just making sure. Okay, perfect. Just double checking. I always like to make sure everything's going well.
Yeah.
So which one should you pick, right? The point of impedance is to impede the system, which is you're trying to apply a perturbation, a sinusoidal perturbation to the system that makes the system respond, but not so much that it's nonlinear, it's unstable, the response is going absolutely crazy. And so in a lot of cases, you're looking at microamps, millivolts, microvolts, not usually microvolts, usually millivolts, but it depends on your system. And so this gets to the heart of your question, where you have a very low impedance, and I'll walk through why this matters. The impedance, you can think of it as analogous to Ohm's law. So E or V equals IR. So this middle one here, E is equal to IZ, right? So you can think about it that way. This is just solving Ohm's law for all three variables. It's just in three different ways of showing the equation. So let's consider two cases. One if the impedance is really big, and one if the impedance is really small. So yours is the second situation, but in a lot of cases, the impedance is rather large, relatively large. Let's just say kilo ohms, something in that range, hundreds of ohms. It's pretty easy to handle from a stability perspective and a potentiostat. And so if the the impedance is large, what that means is that a small change in the potential elicits a small change in the current. You can look at this by just looking at the numbers with the forms of Ohm's law that I have up top here. So for instance, if the impedance is 1 kilo ohm, well, if I apply a 10 millivolt amplitude perturbation, what is the current response? I can just solve. I have it here. I is equal to E over Z. So 10 millivolts of amplitude swing over 1 kilo ohm gives you 10 microamps. So I put a check here because just generally speaking, this is like within the wheelhouse of a potentiostat. A potentiostat can easily measure 10 millivolts and 10 microamps. Almost any commercial potentiostat can do this. That's good. And so what it means is if my impedance is pretty large, I can do potentiostatic EIS pretty easily and adjust the numbers as needed and get a good perturbation and a good response. Now, in your case, and in some other situations, if the impedance is small, what it means is that basically you can look at the I is equal to E over Z. So Z is in the denominator. So if Z is smaller, because it's in the denominator, small in the denominator makes the quantity larger. So I gets bigger when Z is smaller. So any amplitude perturbation with a small impedance means my current response will be really big. And so that's kind of what you were asking, like I can't do potentiostatic because of this situation. So this is an extreme. This is a really small impedance, but it's just using it to illustrate a point. So for instance, if I have 1 milliohm of impedance and I apply the same perturbation of 10 millivolts, it means that my swing in current is 10 amps. That's a lot. There are potentiostats for sure that can measure 10 amps, but swinging up and down 10 amps plus or minus 10 amps is really aggressive and potentially hazardous, let's just say, to the system. So this is bad. Like this is not a good idea, let's just say, to do. So what we have is a situation, again, to the point of your question, where if I have a large enough impedance, potentiostatic impedance can work fine. But if it's small, I can either decrease the applied amplitude potential or I can do galvanostatic impedance. Okay, so if you think about decreasing the applied amplitude, if I have this, again, this is an extreme example, but just for illustration, 1 milliohm, and I apply 10, or I want the response to be, for instance, 10 microamps, just like before. It means I have to perturb 10 nanovolts of amplitude. And that's just too small. A potentiostat can't really control 10 nanovolts. So, I'm kind of limited by the minimum controllable potential like step that my potentiostat can do. And it's usually microvolts, sometimes low millivolts, if you want a decent signal. So you're up against it. You're going to be stuck with a relatively high current. And so what we tend to do is galvanostatic impedance. Now you can come up with E's and I's that will be trickier here, but basically when you're controlling the current, you can control the current up to milliamp levels a lot of the time, and you'll get a response. It's easier to get the response of a low-ish voltage or potential than it is to control that in some cases. And also there's a stability. It's a little bit harder and complex to talk through, but from a potentiostat perspective, it's easier to control it and keep it stable galvanostatically. And this is the last point to make about your system in terms of, you said, is it a problem? Right. One of the reasons why it's often not a problem is because in these systems where you have a very low impedance, which these tend to be things like batteries, right? Batteries, sometimes fuel cells, sometimes capacitors, right? One of the typical modes of operation, I guess you'd say, of a battery or a system like this is that it is charged or discharged to a particular state of charge or like condition, right? And the voltage is often constant in those conditions. So it's most common with a battery to sort of think about this. But like if your battery is fully charged, let's say it's at 4 volts or 4.1 volts, right? And let's say what I want to do is I want to do impedance at 3.8 volts. Okay. For two reasons, I would say you can do this, and also you would not want to do this in the way that you're thinking, maybe, which is to say, well, I'm just going to apply 3.8 volts potentiostatically and do impedance. That would be a bad idea because you would be instantly applying a large overpotential from its current 100% charge. You'd be like rapidly discharging it if you just apply 3.8 volts. And so it's not going to be stable or steady at all, first of all. And so potentiostatic isn't even a good choice there. And so if you say, okay, well, I can't do galvanostatic because I can't control the voltage and I won't be at 3.8 volts. That's true. So this is a two-step process. You have to apply a negative current, a discharge current, and drop its voltage to 3.8 or whatever voltage is you're trying to do. And then it will stay there because now you've reduced its state of charge to 60% or whatever. And so if you're saying you want to do impedance at 60% state of charge, which is 3.8 volts, whatever the corresponding numbers are, this is a multi-step process. You're going to discharge for a while until you get to the voltage, then do galvanostatic. You're not controlling the voltage, but it's at the voltage you want because you brought it there first. And so a lot of the times, it's more like, thankfully, a lot of the times, the systems in which you've described, which is low impedance systems where you want to, you basically have to do galvanostatic impedance, but you want it to be at a certain voltage. They allow you to pre-set that condition galvanostatically, like you're gonna discharge or charge to that voltage that you want. Then you could do galvanostatic impedance. So from that perspective, if that's a system that you're dealing with, no, it's not an issue at all because you can just get yourself to the condition that you need. If for some reason you are dealing, and I don't know a lot of systems that fall under this category, perhaps there are some and I just don't know, where they can't be charged or discharged, let's say, to the voltage of interest, in the way that I described, like a battery can. And they have a tremendously low impedance in which you can't really do potentiostatic impedance for the reason I just showed, but you really need it to be at a certain voltage. Unfortunately, the answer might just be that you're going to struggle to do this. If the voltage doesn't sort of stay on its own where you want it to be, then yes, I think it's possible you just might not really be able to, or you're going to be working at the extreme sensitivity limit of the instrument. Like you might have to set it to whatever voltage you want and do like as small an amplitude as possible. You'll be at like 1 millivolt or like 100 microvolts, and it's still like 100, milliamps of current, like really like hard numbers to have, like really low voltage, really high current. It's not ideal. You might be pushing on the limits of things. That might be your only recourse. But in a lot of cases, I think, and I hope that it would be the first situation I described, which is that you can pre-treat or precondition your system to the voltage that you wish to do impedance at, then do your impedance likely galvanostatically, and you should have some success there. And that is the last thing I'll say about this. That is the way in which battery researchers, for instance, do impedance at a bunch of different voltages or at a bunch of different states of charge. You charge it up for 35 minutes to a certain level, you let it rest for a bit, then you do impedance. All right, then you charge it up 25% more, let it rest, and then you do impedance. And that's how you get impedance at all these different voltages or all these states of charge. It's because you have other steps involved. It's not just impedance at each of those. It's not really feasible to do that. So I hope that kind of talks through that problem a little bit. And hopefully nature bound, if you do come across this live stream several weeks later than anticipated, hopefully I've kind of addressed that question, and apologies again for getting to it, a month late, but there we go. So
yeah, happened. No, that was great. I think that was a great answer. Very, very in depth. We do have a couple questions that came in. We might need a little bit more clarification. Canoe just says, bro, I just started electrochem yesterday. Currently, I am a G aspirant. So which chapters does this topic require for a perfect base and advanced preparation? We don't. I'm not really so sure. I mean, we understand that. I think that the G is a type of exam, very advanced science exam.
yeah, it's like the entrance exam for India, I think, right?
Oh, okay, yeah,
I always forget what it means. For some reason, I always think general, but it's J.
yeah.
It's now I can look it up.
Yeah.
A G.
But we don't actually know the chapters, like
Joint entrance exam. That's
joint entrance exam.
So it's in India. I assume if you want to go to an IIT, for instance, in India, you have to take the G.
Yeah.
And it's just a series of chemistry and I suppose some electrochemistry related questions. And IITs, for instance, the Indian Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
I'm going to mess up the numbers. There's something like 20 to 25 in that range of them all around the country, and they're very prestigious, and they can be difficult to get into. And there's of course other universities in India, but the IITs are pretty highly regarded and they're pretty competitive. So I would assume, Nikun, that you are in a situation that you trying to get a good grade in your G and help you get placed at one of the IITs or something like that. The interesting thing is that this is a case where a textbook like Barden-Faulkner's Electrochemical Methods is probably perfect for your preparation. Now, it's a big textbook, right? But a lot of the kinds of questions that are in the G exam are formulaic, like textbook kinds of questions, really. It's not research per se, right? So my suggestion, I guess you'd say, would be to really try to get, dig into the Barden-Faulkner's Electrochemical Methods textbook, like the first several, I don't know how many chapters, but the first several chapters that really, like, if it's electrochemistry primarily that you're, interested in, the first several chapters, of course, kind of detail what voltage and current, potential and current, and, what electrochemistry is, and symbols like the Nernst equation, the Butler-Volmer equation, all these sorts of very standard kinds of electrochemical principles and the plots that are associated with them. And then the end of each chapter, and I did this when I was in graduate school, for instance, I took a class on electrochemistry using this textbook, and some of the homework problems were the problems at the end of each chapter. So it's a typical sort of textbook where there's, questions that you can try to solve, of course, at the end of each chapter. And so as far as electrochemistry, as far as generally the G and other sorts of chemistry related questions, of course, that's a whole different situation. I mean, similar answer probably, like there's chemistry textbooks, of course, and the sorts of questions related there are probably a similar kind of phenomenon. But for electrochemistry, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to think that Barden-Faulkner might be too advanced.
It could be. You're exactly right.
Even though the G is very complicated, like some of the questions I've seen are quite difficult.
I think you might be right. It might be a little advanced. I just don't know of any other like texts that would help in the exam preparation world. Yeah. Right. Because it's true. Research wise, we have a lot of answers because, doing a PhD and all of that is not quite as textbook heavy, you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
more advice, this and that, getting
Yeah.
in the lab and trying things and whatnot. But for a class and for the academic portion, it's usually textbook. At least plays a decent role, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. For like an undergraduate level, the Barden Faulkner textbook is probably pretty advanced. For that level, you're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, so sometimes we've gotten some people try to ask us G questions. They tend to focus on like thermodynamics
Mm.
and stoichiometry. Um, there's almost like in some cases very little in the way of electrochemistry, and the electrochemistry questions they do provide. I was always under the thought that like it's either memorization of a very specific reaction, like how, maybe like a lead acid battery or something happens,
Yeah.
and then some kind of determination about like the potential and whether something is a spontaneous reaction or not, or how many moles, like a Faraday's law kind of thing. Like, oh, you electrolyze a certain thing and you just have like coulombs and you're calculating moles and that's it. It never got it never got to the like the weird like IR compensation, electrochemical potential type of questions and stuff like that that I would think about for Barden Faulkner, or even touching on Butler-Volmer kinetics and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
that's probably true. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like if you have like a general preparation book, then like just work on that.
I'm guessing
and then
they make
maybe
G
yeah, like
prep books like in India,
yeah,
but I don't know. I haven't seen any. I don't know.
it's got to be a good
But
money operation.
yeah,
Standardized testing.
exactly. We have that in the U.S. I mean,
Yeah,
like the SATs or the ACTs. There's different standardized
Yeah.
tests, and for example, like high school entrance into college. There's those kinds of things here, and there's lots of books and courses to help students prep. And so I would assume in India there's similar kinds of things, but of course I don't know. I did not grow up in India or go to school in India, so I can't speak to that. But that's about as much as we can probably talk through this, only from our limited understanding and the few random people who throw G questions like copy paste at us and expect us to just answer their exam for them. So
yeah.
But good luck, I suppose.
Yeah.
So Hasith's general question, I'm not sure we have an answer because I'm not sure what this is a question, but have you researched projects about electrochemistry? Is it like, do we have any, or have we heard of any? Like, are you just asking about what are the research projects in electrochemistry? I'm not sure I understand this question. So Hasith, if you are still here, please clarify. I don't know what you're asking, to be honest. Please clarify.
Yeah, because it's like do we have the like, we're called Pine Research, but it's Pine Research Instrumentation.
Yeah.
So like we make the instrumentation for electrochemistry research groups and labs.
Research is an adjective.
Yeah.
Instrumentation is a noun. We make research instrumentation. It's not Pine, the company that does research.
Yeah.
It's Pine, the company that makes instrumentation that's used for research. So instrumentation used for research is research instrumentation.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like people sometimes mess that up because
they think that we do R&D.
Yeah,
which, we do R&D on our equipment, and we do some.
Yeah.
We'll do a experiment here and there about it, but we're not a research lab or a research company per se. Like, we're not studying the next state of the art supercapacitor material. That's not what our company does. So if that was part of your question, I hope that clears it up. But if your question is just about research topics in general, or you want us to comment on how research is going in some field or something, I mean, we will do the best to answer if we can, but please clarify. Otherwise we're going to move on, because I'm not, again, sure precisely what you mean. So Rajiv, Dr. Rajiv
LinkedIn questions, great,
has a question. Prabhakar has asked, in an electrolyzer cell performing galvanostatic impedance at high current densities due to voltage fluctuations, higher current amplitudes seem to be required to get meaningful results. So are 10 amps plus or minus 2 amp conditions going to be useful? Absolutely. That seems high.
Mm.
For example, if you have a 10 amp system, 2 amps is probably a little too high, is my guess. Usually you want to probably aim for like, just throw out some numbers, like 1/20th, maybe 1/10th at most. Should in many cases be sufficient to generate a meaningful result, right? You've got 20% of the overall current, I guess, is if I'm reading this correctly. You got 10 amps and you're doing a 2 amp amplitude. That's a little high. I would expect that you might be pushing into the range where you're going to get possibly some nonlinear results if your current is too high. But maybe not. Maybe that's required. I would have to see what the voltage response is, and just check that your Lissajous plots, if you can see them, look good. Make sure that the results look linear and stable and causal and everything, with amplitudes that high. So it's sort of a two-pronged answer. The first is that you're probably wise to be apprehensive about the magnitude of this current amplitude. It's quite high. However, absolutely, it's perfectly reasonable with larger stack fuel cells and electrolyzers. It's pretty common, right, as you get to 25 square centimeter or 50 or 100 square centimeter, even single ones. Yeah, they'll pull 5, 10 amps, 20 amps. So if you're doing impedance on it, you got to have a pretty high amplitude. You're not going to get any signal at 100 milliamps, or 10 milliamps, or you're just not. The system's not going to feel that much current at all. The voltage response will be negligible, if anything. So yeah, for sure. It can be tricky, of course, because not all maybe instruments can apply a signal that large. So I assume you're probably used to that, or have a potentiostat or some sort of a FRA separately that can apply large amplitude signals, of course. But no, it's not unusual, and I think that that's perfectly reasonable to have to apply a larger current to get meaningful results out of a larger electrolyzer or fuel cell. So I think you're on the right track, for sure. Just make sure it's not so big that you're sending the voltage wildly out of the range of normal operation, because you could damage the system. But what you've described does not sound to be that way. So
Tiki has 2 questions. The first one is, when we learn to interpret CV graphs when we are performing electro-organic reactions, any book or paper specifically? So are there any books or articles that can be used to help interpret CV graphs? I think one book I might recommend is from Jean-Michel Savant. I think it's like biomolecular electrocatalysis. He actually goes through, this is mostly for electrocatalysis as opposed to, say, cyclic voltammetry, but most organic electrochemical reactions are homogeneous in nature, which means that the nature of electron transfer, kind of the electron tunnels between the molecule and the electrode. There's not like a bond that's formed to create for the electron to transfer. And that book goes into a lot of different shapes of voltammograms, especially when you have catalysis occurring and when you have, so this is not just an organic reaction occurring, but an organic chemistry reaction plus another molecule, which tends to be the case. You will get these kinds of different shaped voltammograms, S-shaped voltammograms, irreversible voltammograms. So you have a coupled chemical reaction. There are definitely a lot of other papers as well that talk about this. I'm just gonna shout out Jillian Dempsey from UNC Chapel Hill. She does a lot of this kind of work, and some of her graduate students have written reviews, and she's written.
Is this the one, Elements of Molecular?
Yeah, that's it.
I'll just share it while you're talking about it.
Yeah,
I'd find
that's right.
it.
Elements of
Yeah.
molecular and
I'm not
bio.
familiar with this book either, but personally, I suppose. But Jean-Michel Savillon was one of the most famous,
electrochemists.
Yeah, electrochemists in general, and also
Yeah.
just electroanalytical chemists who shined a lot of light on the shapes of CVs, what they mean, and those kinds of things, right? You can see in the text cover here, if I zoom in, like
it's all these different shapes.
It's all these different shapes. Yeah,
and
they
all
like
mean different things.
what you can divine from just the shape, and then in addition to mathematics and whatnot. So
yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. There's also we're also going to plug like simulation, like CV simulation's another way to look at it, and we offer like simulation software. So if you do have chemical reactions and electron transfer reactions in your organic electro-organic reaction, then I'd recommend some of our software as well. And let us know, Tiki, if you have any further questions or elaborations about that, because there are many different shapes of voltammograms. They all mean so many different things depending on what your system is. His next question, we're just kind of going in order of how the questions are received. He wants to know, what are parameters we check while testing a battery, and what are the terms called for what? And what are the terms called? What do they mean physically in real life battery, or of a phone, like open circuit potential is a and other things. So I think there's a lot of different parameters that battery scientists use when they're testing and looking at batteries. I actually had a whole because I just came from this battery course. He gives you a whole list and actually like a calculation for all the different things, because there's there's the C rate, there's the capacity, there's the voltage, there's the state of charge.
I can make a short list for you.
Yeah,
if you want.
If you have one.
Just talk. I don't have one, but I'll make one.
Oh, just make one.
I'll talk through some battery things for you. I don't know if it's sort of general here, but this is just like battery, batteries. So a battery consists of an anode. Wow, writing is really bad. And
we're at practice.
It's true. It's true. Also, it's just hard anyway.
Yeah.
Anode and a cathode, and then you have a separator. So here's my anode, and here's my cathode. These aren't meant to be physical. I'm just drawing anything. Okay. So we have the voltage of a battery. Call it, whatever, V battery. That is basically equal to the voltage of the cathode minus the voltage of the anode. Okay, so there's one parameter for you, I guess. We have the current, and that's just, there's nothing to write. It's that's just how many electrons are moving in one direction or the other. They're either moving from the anode to the cathode or from the cathode to the anode. In one case, the cathode is reducing, or and the anode is oxidizing, or in the other case, the other situations are occurring, and one of those is called charge and one of those is called discharge. So these are just the most basic possible things I can say about a battery in terms of what's happening. In terms of other more complicated kinds of things, we have what's called capacity of our battery. Okay. So this, I'll just say this is in amps, right? Capacity is in a unit typically called amp hours. And so I just talked about the voltage of the battery is the energy difference, basically, how much energy the battery has. Current is how much energy is flowing between the anode and the cathode. Capacity is how long that energy can flow. Okay. So if we're flowing 1 amp in our battery between the anode and the cathode in either direction, we want to know how long we can do that, because we can't do that forever. Eventually it will be fully discharged or fully charged, or we're going to run out of energy. And so amp hour is a is a unit that we use to describe how long I can keep getting stuff out of my battery or putting stuff into my battery, energy into my battery. So amp hour is what we talk about there. And then open circuit voltage or open circuit potential, that's just whatever the voltage is at any moment in time when the current is equal to zero. Basically, when the battery is idle, nothing's happening, it has a particular voltage, whatever the chemical situation is at the anode and the chemical situation is at the cathode, how much lithium is in either side, how much sodium, and whatever the battery type is, it will have a particular set of voltages at the cathode and the anode, right? These will be certain numbers, and the voltage of the battery will be the OCV at whatever time that you take it. Now, as far as a phone is concerned, the way your phone typically works is it has a battery in it, and all of these, whatever terms and things are present or playing some role. But your phone has a certain voltage associated with it. And the voltage will have a lower limit and the voltage will have an upper limit. Okay. And so if the voltage is at the lower limit, roughly speaking, your battery is at 0%. If the voltage is at the upper limit, your battery is at 100%. And so the phone itself is measuring kind of like the OCV. It's not necessarily the OCV if it's actually actively working and charging, but basically the phone, what it's doing, or any device really, but a phone's just the most obvious one, is measuring the voltage at all times. And it's effectively figuring out where is it along this line between the upper and lower voltage limits. And if it's right here, if the voltage is some percentage between, that's when your phone tells you it's at, 65%. It's because the voltage down here is 0 volts and this one is 1 volt. And so what the phone is measuring is 0.65 volts, for instance. And so it tells you 65% because it's that percentage between 0 and 1. Now those numbers aren't always 0 and 1, and it's 3 and 4 and whatever the number is. But that's basically how the phone is working when it tells you how much percentage it has left until it dies. It's a voltage readout, and it's just somewhere between the upper and the lower limits. Okay, so that's how that works basically. Other things. What do they physically mean in real life? What they physically mean in real life is how much energy the thing can give you, and then how much energy it takes to get brought back up to 100%. That's what all this is, right? So when your voltage of your phone is at the lower limit, it's at 0%. It needs more energy. So you have to put energy into it until the voltage reaches back up to the upper or close to it. And when you're putting energy into it, you are raising its voltage by adding current into the system for a certain amount of time, which is the capacity. And that raises the voltage, and then you can take the energy out of it and play Candy Crush or whatever people do these days. That uses the energy of the battery, right? I hope that wasn't too simple, maybe a little pedantic. I'm not trying to be overly simplistic per se, but I don't know, the content of your question made me think you just kind of want a general overview of like what's going on, what's happening. It's about as like sort of general I think I can be on what these terms are and the things about how a battery works. If you have more specific questions, Tiki, please let us know. I guess I'll leave it there as a pretty general high level overview of, I don't know, the different things involved in a battery, I suppose. So.
Yeah. All right. Stupid man. It's probably not a stupid man. Said that my colleague used 100 milliamp RMS in galvanic EIS for microelectrodes, carbon fiber, in 2022 in ferricyanide, frequency between 0.01 hertz to 100 kilohertz. I tried to replicate it now, but Gamry isn't letting me. Can you share what stands out and feels wrong? The reviewer is trashing our data, saying the amplitude RMS is too high for our purpose. Is potentiostatic EIS the way to go for this? Thanks. He also mentions, this is the last thing because I believe this is all part of one kind of long question discussion. And why is my I guess DC voltage high, and what does it mean even when I lower the current RMS to 0.01 milliamps in EIS? Well, not that I've worked too much with carbon fiber electrodes, but I do believe that a 100 milliamps RMS is quite a lot. So
That's enormous.
to give you like another sense, like if I had a small carbon fiber electrode, like this is a microelectrode, and I had maybe a millimole solution, like a 1 millimole solution. I think at best I could maybe get like 1 microamp
Yeah,
at best.
At best. Yeah.
It probably I'm in the nanoamp range because my area is super small. So the fact that you're like 10,000 times higher current, something else has to be happening for that to occur.
I'd be surprised if you weren't destroying your entire electrode with an amplitude that high.
Yeah.
Even 0.01, 10 microamps might still be way too high.
Oh yeah. 10, yeah, and even you just said 10, 10 microamps, 0.01 milliamps may also still be too high. And you're getting this very high DC voltage because if you're running this in potentiostatic or galvanostatic, if you're running it in potentiostatic, the potentiostat's going to try to increase the potential to as high a limit as possible to reach that current. And it's probably struggling to do that because
Probably
the
can't.
area is so small.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it the other way, galvanostatically, the voltage will change about wildly.
It's probably hitting the limits of the instrument.
It's absolutely hitting or I'm not too surprised they're saying that like gamma ray isn't letting you, and I think that's happening because of the physical capability of the potentiostat. And it's not to say gamma ray has a bad potentiostat. Like our potentiostat probably couldn't even do that. Biologic probably couldn't even do it. Like no potentiostat would be able to do something like that.
Yeah. If you have a microelectrode with an extremely small surface area, as Alex said, at any mild overpotential, the best current response you're going to get, as Alex said, is probably in the nanoamp range at highest. Sometimes you have picoamp resolution in these kinds of electrodes. So there's a couple of things here. One is that if you're trying to apply, as you said, 1 million times more current than you would expect to get under any moderate voltage perturbation, the only thing the potentiostat can try to do is send the voltage to the absolute limit, which is probably 8 volts, 10 volts. I don't know what it is, obviously, for whatever instrument you're using, but that's not nearly enough. It's also a very, very bad idea because you don't want to swing the voltage that high, most probably. It's very, very damaging to your system. You might have destroyed the carbon electrode. So one possible thing is that you tried to do this, damaged your electrode, and now all subsequent tests are garbage because your electrode's destroyed. I have no idea if that's the case. I'm just saying it's possible that would happen because a very, very high or very, very low potential, especially at a carbon electrode, can cause it to over-oxidize, over-reduce. And then the electrode itself just disintegrates or whatever, especially a microelectrode, because they're very, very fragile normally. And so you're going to have to probably go down very, very far. And if you're stuck needing to do galvanostatic, I don't know precisely if you'll be able to do it, to be honest. I don't know what the lower limit of resolution and sensitivity of your potentiostat will be. Like, can it do a 1 nanoamp amplitude? Can it do a 10 picoamp amplitude? Probably not. I mean, I don't know, maybe it can. That would be wonderful. But you might be stuck trying to go to that low of an amplitude so that you get an appropriate response commensurate with the size of your electrode. And that is going to require some small things. Now, you could also try potentiostatic,
Mhm.
For instance, a few, however many millivolt amplitude, that might be wiser, and that will elicit a relative response of the current, like however many nanoamps or whatever. That might be easier for the instrument to do. It also might be tough because the instrument can't, you might also generate like picoamps of resolution at 10 milliamps of amplitude, or whatever the numbers are.
Mhm.
And the instrument is like mostly noise because that's like at the lower measurement limit. That could be a problem. So, but you won't know until you try. But as a general rule or advice, you ought to start small, then go up. Don't start up and then go down.
Mhm.
So in other words, try it as small as possible. Try the smallest amplitudes that you can, because you're less likely to damage the system. So it's like at the rate you're at, it's way too high. You're probably not getting good results. At a very, very small signals, it's really bad. You're not getting results.
Mhm.
But only one of those two situations are you really possibly damaging your electrode. And it's the first one. So if you do really, really small perturbations and you get like no good results, okay, it's not good that you have no results, but at least you're almost certainly not damaging anything. And you can increase slowly till you start getting a signal. But if you start really high, you're in problem. I see there's a response.
Yeah, he has a response. He says, when I try low current, the highest frequency I was used lower to like 1000 hertz to or 100 hertz. These experiments cannot be done. We don't know the workaround and are thinking of removing the data completely.
Yeah, there's probably a big stability problem at the higher frequencies.
Yeah, and you may also be running into reference like I'm assuming this is a 3 electrode system because it's a carbon electrode with ferrocyanide.
Could have reference electrode
Could have
problems. But
reference
also
electrode issues.
in a capacitive system, which is probably is relatively capacitive.
Yeah. Could be.
Capacitance, the impedance. Let me think.
I mean, I also want to ask the following question, which is
Maybe it's
this is kind of the thing. This is what I would say is maybe like the thing to do, or what I would recommend. Is first, I want to know if he's done this. Have you just done regular cyclic voltammetry? And I don't know, it's ferricyanide, so I can't remember if that's an oxidation reaction.
It's like 0.2 ish. I don't know.
So maybe it looks something like this. I'm not
Are
too
you
sure.
doing the Texas convention?
I'm trying to remember which one. Is it? Oh, I can't remember if it's a reduction or an oxidation. Right.
I can't remember which is which. Ferro. But anyway, yeah.
Let's say you got a CV like this. I'd be curious. Like, what is this current? Right. Like, what's this current range here? Like, because that'll tell you. We're guessing that you have microamp or 1 microamp or 100 nanoamp. But when you figure out what this value is, that's how you're gonna, this is what it's gonna determine, kind of around how much voltage you can, or sorry, how much voltage, like what range here can you apply in like potentiostatic EIS? That's what it's gonna help determine, like how far out you can go. So I do that first. That's gonna give you some real interesting data, even when the scan rate changes. Um, this is still a good like approximation. So I would say do that. And then he says yes. Ferrocene methanol in potassium ferrocyanide. It's in the nanoamp range. Okay, all right. So that's good. We kind of in some way accurately predicted this in a way.
Yes.
So a couple things to try if you want. I would say you run into issues with reference electrodes if you're using like this is potassium ferrocyanide, ferrocene methanol. So you're in aqueous condition. You might be using a silver chloride reference electrode. I might just put a silver wire in. You're not going to perturb the system that much, and ideally, the potential remains somewhat stable when you're doing EIS. That could be a thing that's preventing you from getting some data.
You're also at an impasse. So for instance, at low currents, your max frequency is a kilohertz or whatever. And at uh, and so you're missing, maybe some of the high frequency information. Okay, fair enough. Well, if you want to get the higher frequency information, if the only way to do that is to increase the amplitude, then you're stuck. Is you have to pick, do you want incomplete data or no data? Because like in the CV that Alex just drew, if you increase your amplitude, you're not doing impedance anymore. Like it's not linear for sure. It's you have twofold problem. I mean, the first is that, like I just talked about before, at a really high amplitude, you might just destroy your system. And that's a problem. But in addition to destroying your system, as if that weren't bad enough, your impedance data is irrelevant, because if you're causing the voltage to go plus or minus 4 volts, well, it's not linear. It's just, I mean, it's going over the redox pair and back and forth. It's almost like a really fast CV at that point. That's not definitionally impedance. It's not stable. It's not linear. You have to have a linear response. So, if the situation you've described is as you say, for instance, and just some change of the potentiostat settings or the filter or the stability filter setting, I don't know, precisely what control you have over those, and you might not have control over those settings in the manufacturing and the software that you're using. But if you aren't able to get, for example, low current or low potential amplitudes and get any results at higher frequencies, then you just might not be able to do it. It just might not be possible. You might have an instrument that doesn't have a low enough sensitivity for what you're doing. And that's not unusual. Nanoamps and below are hard. They're difficult. It starts to get,
Yeah, Faraday cage.
Yeah, you might need a Faraday cage as well. So try putting everything into a Faraday cage. That might help filter out some of the noise and things like that. So, but yeah, this is a cool,
It's a good question.
problem.
Very
to
good
talk
question.
through. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Got a LinkedIn question from Anthony, and it says, "Hello guys, thanks for holding this event. I'm currently a master's student at NC State in materials engineering. I'm interested in R&D and curious about career options with a master's degree and a PhD. Could you describe the job descriptions of R&D," and then it cuts off there, "electrochemists and engineers with both MS and PhDs respectively?" Well, it's good to see a person from North Carolina. As always, we're not all that far away. We're in Durham, if you didn't know, and you're in Raleigh. So, I think, let's see, career options in R&D specifically for like electrochemists and engineers. We've been talking about batteries. That seems to be the biggest like opportunity, I would say, at this point. North Carolina is actually investing a lot of money into batteries, battery research. There's actually a lithium mine out in kind of the western
part somewhere.
the western part of North Carolina. There's a lot of companies. I was at UNC Greensboro recently. Some startups about precious materials and precious metal kind of recycling, if you will, like extraction from either ores or from damaged junk or things like that. Those are things that I'm at least seeing in the career. Now, between a master's and a PhD, I can't say I have a lot of experience with like a master's, but I know that people who lead R&D projects with PhDs, typically, I think it depends. I don't know. I guess I'm just gonna say it depends. Most of the time, if you're starting off with a PhD in some kind of industry, I know like my colleagues went to go work for like Intel after getting their PhD, and they were part of a team. So they may have had a research project, but they were ultimately part of a manufacturing process, research and development. So they were developing new processes related to microchips and things like that. And electrochemists will also work on those kinds of problems and processes too. because in terms of chip design, because it is still a surface science. And yeah, if you're a PhD, people will come to you more for your troubleshooting capabilities, your ability to innovate new things, come up with ideas. I would say if you're a master's student, you'll be more of a, I want to say like an order taker, sort of say, but you'll have a little bit more. If you have a bachelor's degree, you're a lab monkey. Someone just tells you what to do, you go in the lab and you do it. When you're a master's, you have a little bit more control, higher, you're a little bit higher up on the food chain, sort of say. Maybe you're doing some management stuff, but you're not like maybe directing things. Now I'm making up a lot of stuff because I haven't, this is just what I have seen, but I don't know enough, and maybe engineering is completely different. I know chemists.
There's similarities for sure. My impression, generally speaking, is that a PhD is, well, this isn't rocket science. A PhD is better, obviously, in terms of the hierarchy, right?
Mhm.
But it's also better from the perspective that there's quite a lot of jobs, just from the listings, for instance, that you'll see where they require, 9,000 years of experience or whatever the things are, right? Which is an annoying thing. It's like, well, how do I get my first job when every job requires experience? That's a common
Mhm.
irritation that I sympathize with.
Yeah.
But a lot of these kinds of jobs that are technical jobs, they'll say something like master's or PhD in, chemistry or
Yeah.
engineering or related field and things like that, or 3-4 years of experience or whatever. Okay. My impression is a couple of things. First is that an employer, when picking between someone with a PhD and a master's, will most probably pick the person with the PhD because, frankly, they're likely more qualified, right? Or at least they have higher credentials, and there's a better chance, probably from the employer's view, that they will be a higher quality candidate. Let's just say it's a more difficult degree. It takes more time and those kinds of things. So from an employer's perspective, I think that a PhD is a wiser choice for setting yourself up for more money in a better position. The second thing is that they are different for sure, in a very crucial way, which is that a PhD, if it's done correctly, if you have a good advisor and you have a good system that's working with you, the PhD, my advisor always put it where it's called a doctor of philosophy for a reason, because even though you're studying science, chemistry, or engineering, or whatever you're studying, there's a philosophical element to it. You're learning how to think at a higher level, because a research project is not easy, no matter what it is. And you're learning how to think, how to solve problems, and how to conceptualize things in an independent way. Not to say that a master's student can or doesn't do those things, but it's not exactly part and parcel to the master's degree itself. The master's degree is more about doing a lot of things and becoming a master in those things. And so you prove to your employer or to the hiring world, or whatever you want to say, that you are highly competent at doing something. And this is overly simplistic. It's like, oh, well, you can't think about anything because you don't have a PhD. It's not, it doesn't mean you're like stupid or anything. It's just that the PhD is supposed to lend credibility to the idea that you can like think critically at a level, and research requires that, and you can construct and write papers. And obviously there's some master students who publish, but it's more common for PhD students to get more sort of publications, and those kinds of skills translate into a lot of industries, and frankly will get you probably in the door a little bit easier, and probably demand a little bit of a higher salary. And then the last thing I'll say is that to further the first thing that I said, one of the annoying things about trying to get a job is that they often say things like you need 1 billion years of experience. And, well, I don't, because I'm trying to get a job and I can't get experience to feed my experience when I don't have any experience. It's not, I wasn't going to mention it, but it's like this, yo dog, I got some experience to get my experience so I could have my experience to get my job. It's like, I got you some experience. Well, how? I don't,
Mm-hmm.
It's a chicken and egg thing. Something has to happen first, right? as a general rule, I find, like from a resume perspective, graduate school counts as job experience. I treated it that way. I find it probably varies from employer to school to everyone's perception, but my impression and my like understanding is that in many cases when they say like 3 4 years, like 4 years, I would consider, for example, graduate school as like 4 years of experience. It is.
Yeah.
It's basically a job. I mean, you're being paid usually to be there. You have a stipend usually. It might not be much, but it's, you know, you're still, it's better than the alternative, not being paid or having to pay, right? So you're paid to be there, and you're doing a job, and you're doing research, and then you know, the university gets something out of it from you. They get research and publications and notoriety or whatever, and you get something out of it from them. You get a resume building and a degree. And this is transactional, and it's experience. And so when someone's applying, you know, I'm sure not all employers will exactly look at it this way, but I always looked at it that way, where it's like, okay, well, if I got my PhD and I took me 4 years or 5 years to get it, and they're saying I want, you know, 2 years of experience in this degree, well, you can say, well, I can apply. I have a PhD and 4 years of experience in said PhD. I always looked at it that way. Again, I can't promise that every employer will see it that way, but it's an argument that you can make, and I think it's a good argument in my opinion, because again, it's work. It takes a PhD more so than a master's, I would argue. It's a longer period of time, and it's more, it's a higher level thinking. So there's certainly reasons to, you know, limited time or limited resources, or I don't know. You know, maybe you already have a thing with a company or employer, and you're just looking to get a master's, and that's plenty for what they need. There's situations like that, but in a vacuum, I would say PhD is the better choice, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a fly right in front of my face.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I want to get it, but I didn't get it.
Yeah, this always happens. It's summer. It's that time again.
It's so annoying. It's like right in front of my mouth. I'm talking. I'm like, I'm gonna eat it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to eat it, but okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Hopefully, Anthony, that was helpful.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in R&D, I think Neil's right. I think a PhD, if you really like the research aspect of it, then the PhD is for you. All right, moving on. We have some questions. We have a question from Nathan. I have some question about EIS artifacts. My Nyquist plot begins at high frequency above the x-axis and descends towards the x-intercept, in an S shape. Have you seen this behavior before? Inductance? ? Is this inductance?
It's an inductive loop. It's your favorite.
I know, but the thing that I find confusing is it says an S shape.
So here's an example. I have no idea if this is what you're seeing. It might not be. It's just a guess. It's just a guess.
Yes. Let me hide this.
So I don't know if it's something like this. So maybe you have this is like made up data. This is from a webinar. This is a thing. But here it goes towards, it's like almost like a semicircle, but it like kind of loops oddly and kind of doubles back on itself. It's a little bizarre looking. So the first answer I have as a general rule for every bit of impedance data you have, but specifically this weird S shape, and maybe it doesn't look exactly like this, maybe it looks a little different, and that's fine, is do Kramers-Kronig. Kramers-Kronig will reveal, hopefully, relatively quickly, if it's even valid impedance data at all. And so when I zoom in on this weird S or sort of feature, you can see there's no fit at all. This is like total bad. And this data is drifting. When you zoom in here, you can see that it doesn't fit either on either trace pretty well. It deviates. This one looks pretty good, but it's a little bit deceptive. The Nyquist plot shows pretty clearly how badly it fits. It fits okay in the beginning and not at the end. And so if you have something like that and it's an artifact, sometimes artifacts are real from the perspective that like they're things about the instrument or the reference electrode or some part of your system. It doesn't necessarily mean the impedance is bad, but like unstable, drifting, nonlinear, whatever. But it's just a consequence of the instrument electronics, its inability to go fast enough or something based on the reference electrode, based on the electrode configuration or something of that nature. And sometimes it's this, where it's drifting badly, it's nonlinear, it's unstable, there's an actual problem, and Kramer's-Kronig can help reveal that. So that's the first advice I have. The second thing is that just to clarify, when you said that it starts at positive values on the Nyquist plot, for instance.
Yeah.
So
know what that
So I
really
don't know
means.
maybe precisely what's causing that, but I can show you what it might mean in terms of so this is a very simple, what it might mean in terms of the values is what I'm trying to say. So this is a very simple RC, right, with a leading resistor. So you can see I have a leading resistor, it's just a simple semicircle. So I'll just position it somewhere. The resistor is the width of the semicircle. Move it back a little bit so I center it. You can see it starts at the x-axis here, like at 0 on the left, and it ends at the left at 0. Okay, so watch what I do to, this is a CPE, but just pretend it's a capacitor, right? I have alpha at 1. What would cause the left side of my semicircle to not start at 0, but rather start at a higher value? The answer is a very small resistance value. Okay. I'm sorry, resistance, capacitor value. Okay. Now, in your system, I obviously can't speak with authority. It's your system. I'm just a person on YouTube. But whatever is causing it, it could mean, if it's not starting all the way at 0, that you have a small, like double layer capacitance. Maybe you have a really small surface area, or there's some other capacitance of some sort present in your system. What exactly is it? I don't know. But visually, what and numerically, I guess, what causes a Nyquist plot to start like above the x-axis? Well, it could be the thing I just talked about, which is an instrument artifact. The reference electrode could be something related to that, or it could be a very small capacitance. Now, ironically, sometimes those are the same thing. The reference electrode is known to cause what we call stray capacitance. It's a very small capacitor. Sometimes that is what is happening. In some cases, it's usually like femtofarads in that range, or picofarads. Is it pico
to get
like
to
the,
get
the stray capacitance of a reference? We calculated it once.
Oh
Wasn't
yeah,
it like,
yeah. It's like
was it
eight,
like
8
10
picofarads.
Yeah,
or
thank you.
something.
Okay, so like 8
Yeah.
picofarads. So like just the values I have here are picofarads, but not 8. It's like a couple hundred. But anyway, the point being, possibly you have some sort of capacitive, low capacitance that's causing the start of your Nyquist plot, so to speak, to not be there. The other is that you might not just be at a high enough frequency. So this is like 1 megahertz. So this is already really high. But let's just pretend that I'm going to 100 megahertz, which is crazy. Well, that makes it commit. So high enough frequency would resolve the feature in theory. Now, this is ridiculous. 100 megahertz is crazy. So I'm just illustrating that if you had, for example, started at like 10 kilohertz as an upper limit, it's like, oh, it's not even starting the feature at all. It's like, well, maybe you just need to go to a slightly higher frequency. Like in this case, if it was like, oh, well, that's not beginning, but I can just start at a higher frequency. Okay, now I see the whole feature. So that could also be part of the, I don't know, phenomena you're seeing. So Kramer's-Kronig in summary, and then also small capacitance could be the reason why it doesn't start at 0. But I guess the last part, I guess, if it's inductance. So inductance, an inductive effect will occur when the points on the Nyquist plot at some point get closer to the origin. Okay, so if you look at most Nyquist plots, it's a semicircle, it's a diffusional tail, it's a capacitor, it's a whatever. Almost always, if you draw a straight line vector from the origin, 0, 0, on the Nyquist plot to the points, that vector gets bigger as you go along. Everywhere. It always gets bigger. In other words, and that's where frequency goes from high to low. So in other words, over the course of an impedance experiment, almost always the impedance gets bigger as the frequency gets smaller. The only electrical component for which it is the opposite where the impedance goes down as the frequency goes down is an inductor. So, in conclusion, that takes the form of either an S or a curl, but basically at some point, the points on the Nyquist plot get closer to the origin, which means that the line drawn from the origin to the points is now smaller than it was before. That can only happen because of some kind of inductance or inductor effect. I'm not saying anything about what that is because Alex will leave. We don't. It's very bizarre. It's completely unclear why that happens, what the inductor has to do with anything, why physically it's really hard to wrap our head around what is going on. But mathematically, it's the only circuit element that does that. So if you do Kramers-Kronig and you discover this is a real phenomenon, then yes, and the points are getting closer to the origin. Yes, it probably is inductance in some way, which just means that your circuit circuit system will probably need to include an inductor somehow. But what it means is very, very murky. I guess that's how I would leave that. So.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So we have, let's see, next question is from Pankja, who asks, what are the main electrochemical parameters that are crucial for developing a biosensing platform in the lab to bring it to the market as a point of care device? So it's funny. Actually, I've been talking to a company that's actually developing a biosensor, and it's interesting. The electrochemical parameters per se, I would say it's more of like the actual device itself is more important than necessarily the parameters of the the experiment. So most people use square wave voltammetry to measure the analyte in question, whether it's glucose, whether it's some other redox active biomarker that you're looking for. Most of the time, people are now using aptamer-based sensors for biosensing. But to bring something from the lab to the market as a point of care device, really you're looking at being able to create a stable biosensor, one that like you can manufacture it and like you can have it in a factory, and then you can ship it out and it doesn't like degrade. It doesn't react with certain things. A lot of biosensors will just go bad if they're not stored in, say, a buffer solution. Because they're exposed to air, especially if you have some kind of thin film that's doing the sensing for you. So stability, like real stability for under like quote commercial conditions. So can it exist in ambient temperatures, or does it have to be cooled? Not to say that if you have a biosensor that can detect something that is, say, rare, and your biosensor only lasts for like a month, well, the mail service can still get a thing to somebody very quickly, like within a month, if you're cost competitive. If it costs $1,000 to go, see a doctor about, something that you're seeing, but this biosensor just costs $100 plus shipping, then it's like, oh, well, maybe $100 option is economically viable, because you want to get something to market as a point of care device. So that is so that's like a big thing, is I would say the stability, the limit of detection. Do you detect the biomarker within the physiologically relevant concentrations? So that's another big one. And how easy is it to actually make your biosensor? If it's like a 20-step process that takes a whole day to do, and you want to scale this thing up, it's hard. It's really hard to do something like that. So there are business implications, there are science implications in terms of stability, limit of detection, certain contaminants, things like that. How easy or hard is it to make these things? An aptamer, for example, requires that like you develop, a self-assembled monolayer of your specific aptamer. Then you have to backfill it. Then you got to rinse it. Then you got to store it in buffer. And maybe you even have to, surface functionalize your electrode before you even do anything, right? So there's like multiple steps. Um, so, uh, uh, so Pankaj, sorry. I hope that was helpful. If I had to, boil it down to a few crucial parameters in developing biosensors, it's stability, limit of detection at physiologically relevant levels, and then of course just kind of like the economics. How easy is it to make these types of things? So yeah, I hope, and most people are using square wave. But if you can do things, if you can make the measurement with chronoamp, which takes a lot less time, that's a great selling point. If you can really um, accurately measure something with chronoamperometry and not have background signal that's convoluting your data, then like that'd be really great. But oftentimes you need to use slower techniques like square wave or differential pulse to accurately make a measurement that then tells you about how much lead is in this person's blood or something, whatever your biosensor is capable of detecting. So hopefully that was helpful. Let us know if you have any other further questions on that.
I think Free University of India. No, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So Free University of India has asked how to measure hydrogen loading on any metal cathode, say palladium, during electrolysis. Electrolyte is water and lithium chloride. I mean, I think, well, I think palladium is similar to platinum, where it does a adsorption desorption kind of a thing, but
hydrogen also goes into palladium too. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So actually intercalates.
Yeah, so that's like a hydrogen permeation kind of a thing. So I guess there's two, I don't know, methods or kinds of experiments that cross my mind. The first is that when you do like, and this is platinum more so. Again, I don't know if palladium has a similar phenomenon, I guess, or something like that. But with platinum, for instance, when you do a voltammogram of platinum, you get something like this. And this right here, like the area in this part of the curve, is the like platinum hydrogen adsorption. This is a method that's used to get the ECSA, but it's also a method. And so similarly, this right here, for instance, is the platinum hydrogen desorption region. And so in some manner of speaking, you can study how much hydrogen is there through the integration of the current versus time curve of a sweep in these regions. This is where that's like. Now again, palladium is, I think it's a little different. I'm not sure if it behaves exactly the same. The hydrogen evolution reaction and the hydrogen generation, this is usually close to, zero, right? 0 volts versus NHE. It depends on the reference electrode and all that kind of stuff, but it's usually towards the lower voltage range. You'll have that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's a way for you to do it, for example, with palladium and everything. But the other possibility, of course, which Alex mentioned, of palladium kind of intercalates hydrogen, and hydrogen often embrittles systems as well, is to do what's called a hydrogen permeation experiment. And it works with what's called a Devanathan-Stakursky cell. And so it basically is like a very large H cell. And so it's something like this. You'll have a big 2 cells connected with like a spherical joint, and you'll have your sample in between. I'm going to draw it sort of exploded. There's the fly. Get away from me. Oh my gosh. Right in my face as I'm trying to draw. How rude. Okay. And so you'll have these big cells that have a joint in between. Okay. And so this would be like your, I don't know, your palladium your metal sample. And then you'll have something like a counter electrode, platinum counter electrode in either side. As well as a reference electrode in either side. And this is a 2 potentiostat experiment. And so what you're doing actually is you'll have solution on both sides. Sometimes it's the same solution. Sometimes you have base on one side and acid on the other. It's a bit interesting, I guess. There's some variations. But what you're basically doing is on one side, you connect to a potentiostat. Okay. And you're going to actually drop the voltage and generate hydrogen gas. It's supposed to be a hydrogen H2 on one side. And so you kind of get this bubble, you bubble on one side. So like on this side of the electrode, you generate hydrogen gas. And in doing so, some of it bubbles away or, leaves the area or whatever. But some of that hydrogen that's generated there is going to like go through, right, or enter or go in. And you detect it by simultaneously having a second potentiostat on the other side control the potential basically on the other side of the palladium to detect hydrogen. And so this would be usually like a positive potential. So you'll have like oh my gosh, this thing, I didn't get it. I'm going to get it by the end of the live stream, I promise. So you'll have a positive potential on this side and usually like a negative potential on this side. So one side is generating hydrogen, some of which will go through. The other side detects it. So it's like a generate collect, but it's weird because it uses the same metal sample for both the generation and the collection. I don't know if I got it. It's driving me nuts, I swear. And so this is a way to study the hydrogen permeation in a metal, whether it's palladium or steel or whatever. And this is called a hydrogen permeation experiment. Okay. And so this is a kind of corrosion experiment because usually it's like an embrittlement thing. Hydrogen embrittles metal. And so you're just trying to see how much of it goes through and how much of it you detect. And it takes hours too. It can take like 10, 12 hours worth of just letting this run because the hydrogen can be slow in making its way through. Those are the 2 answers that I have for this. I don't know how applicable they all are to your particular research project, but those are my thoughts on hydrogen loading or hydrogen whatever. Now, if it's something different, like you said, if it's a palladium intercalating hydrogen as like a storage mechanism, that might be a different thing. It might be like a more of a galvanostatic charge thing. You can like apply a negative current for a while and it like loads hydrogen in. That might be a separate thing. I know something like magnesium, for example, can load hydrogen up, like magnesium hydride. And that's a third option for it. I don't have a lot of experience in the electrochemistry of that. Like, what does it look like? What are you looking for? But I do think that's one subset, I guess, as well. Those are my thoughts about that, I guess.
Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know very much about hydrogen loading on like palladium during electrolysis, but no, I think what you had was very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, moving on because we got a few more comments here and questions. Hello, guys.
So just for what it's worth, I looked this up and translate. I think this is Lucas.
Oh, that's Lucas.
I believe so. It's tough because like Greek, like we know Greek because we're math, we're science. So like I know Greek letters, but reading it as a word, like in your language, is always like, like the sigma looks like an E, so you want to say like just brain, our brains don't like, I don't find it easy to pronounce letters in Greek because we're used to thinking about it as like the variable for something. Right. Which is, it's interesting, but I tried to plug it into like translate. And I think that your first name is Lucas. I think I'm saying that correctly. I hope I am. Anyway, for what it's worth, I just wanted to say.
Oh, his first name's Lucas.
Fergus.
Because you told me that this whole name is Lucas.
No.
I'm just like, get out of here, man. That's Lucas.
That's a lot of letters.
That's a lot of letters.
The last name appears to be something like Pediaditis.
Pediaditis.
And there might be a pronunciation that I'm butchering like terribly, but I was curious because
Oh, it's Greek. I'm gonna call you Zeus. No,
Yeah.
just joking.
Zeus.
Zeus, because this is an electrochemistry podcast.
That's right. So it's like electricity, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Zapping.
Like,
Yeah, that's actually appropriate.
that might be
The
appropriate.
Greek god of lightning,
Of
or
lightning.
Thor, right? That's Norwegian.
That's the
That's Norse.
Yeah,
Forget it.
I almost thought about Thor a
I'm
minute. I'm
mixed-
like, wait,
that's
wait.
the wrong
Norse
culture.
one.
That's the wrong country. Okay. Anyway, proceed.
Hello guys, Green from Greece. So I have an aquatic lithium battery that charges with 0.01 milliamps for 140 seconds, and the voltage is from 0 to 1 volt. Is there a way to connect it with 2-volt solar cell that produces 40 milliamps? Okay.
You'll have to cut down the voltage in the current.
On the lithium battery.
So like no on the solar cell. So if the solar cell, so you might be able to draw this. You do pretty well. Like when you draw, for instance, whenever someone asks questions about like how potentiostat works, you know, you talk about the voltage. If you have solar cell here, and you connect it to battery, the battery is going to experience 2 volts and presumably close to 40 milliamps. That's bad. That's too much, right?
Okay.
So you have to add something that cuts it down. So it's like adding a resistor, effectively, right? So that's the simplest thing. I'm not an electronics engineer, electrical engineer. There's probably a ways, like if we asked our colleague, they might be able to, you'll have, if you add a resistor, but with a capacitor somewhere, it might, there might be something to that. Like there's a timing aspect of this.
Or something like
that. So you have to dissipate some of the current and some of the voltage that's being supplied.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you plug your phone into the wall, right? To charge your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason why your phone has a plug, and then there's a brick that plugs into the wall. Well, that's not just for show.
Fun. Yeah.
There's a bunch of resistors or whatever in the wall, in the brick, because out of the wall comes, I don't know however many amps, a lot of amps, and 100 volts or 100.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You have like in the US at least, it's like 120 volts.
And some countries
AC,
it's 220. Yeah.
So you have to regulate that.
Yeah. So first of all, it has to convert AC to DC.
Yeah.
Right.
You have DC in this case because you have a solar cell.
Right. So there's no converter.
No
needed.
conversion there.
But your phone can't take, your phone battery is like 4 volts. So your phone can't take 120 volts into it. It will just immediately cause a ton of problems and probably catch fire. So there's stuff in the charger that like resistors or something effectively that cuts the voltage down. So that's the first thing, is that you'd have to get something in between the solar cell and the battery connections that regulate it and cut the voltage down. I don't know if it's as simple as just putting a resistor. That will certainly eat up some of the current. I don't know if it would eat up the voltage necessarily. It depends where it is. So
you'll have like an IR drop. You want a imposed IR drop on this thing.
Right. So my suggestion to you is get the solar cell operating at 2 volts and 40 milliamps, right? Like to a multimeter. So you have like solar cell, the terminals going to a multimeter. And then like this might require some intelligence if you want to calculate stuff, or the alternative is trial and error. So like you have the solar cell going to a multimeter and it's reading 2 volts, and then you connect it in the other way, and you usually have to connect different to measure voltage and current, or you have it to a potentiostat if that's easier, because a potentiostat will measure both current. So connect your solar cell, then just add a resistor in line over here. What is it reading now? Right? Is the voltage the same, but the current is cut down? Or if you add a resistor over here instead, or you add a resistor between, it might be like between the two, something like that, right?
Another option is you can use something like I would say a neutral density filter, but like if you have like a window that is like slightly not opaque but semi-transparent.
Oh yeah, cut the light
just
to
cut
the
the
solar
light.
cell. That's another one.
Find a cloudy day, because you're not going to generate 2 volts on like some of these solar cells. Like it's 2 volts on like with direct
on a good
sunlight on it. So what you could do is you could try to decrease the efficiency of your solar cell.
That's true.
By putting something that blocks some of the light.
Yeah. You can block the light, the voltage and the current output would probably be lower.
Yeah.
But otherwise I think it's a combination of putting either that or some resistor somewhere,
Yeah.
and it will reduce the amount of delivered voltage and or current depending on where the resistor is, whether it's in line with one of the terminals or it's between the voltage and the current. It's between the terminals in line with them,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
This is where I fall off in my knowledge of electrical engineering and precisely how to do those things, because this is like how your phone charger works. Exactly like I said, it's the way that voltage and current is cut down. The circuit design is a little beyond my I'd have to think about it or work it out a little better, and I don't have that knowledge like super well, I just say. But I know you can do that. Like you can cut down how much is delivered by adding some components. And sometimes it's just a resistor or a capacitor or something.
Yeah, no, I do think that, like, oh, if you have 40 milliamps, you can, if you have 40 milliamps, you can determine the resistance that will give you like 1 volt. Let's say, so maybe you have a little bit more control over the, because like if I have a battery, if I have some power source with a set voltage and I put resistors, I just change the current. Like the current that flows through an entire circuit is
It's
constant.
not cutting the voltage down.
So it's not cutting, like it only drops the voltage across certain parts of the
Right, but the delivered voltage is still whatever.
The total voltage is always the same in that case.
So how do you cut the voltage down? What do you do?
I'm trying to think. Well, I think you would maybe
Do you add a resistor to ground or something?
Or
like, I feel like you add a ground resistor.
I want to say that, like, if you have a resistor and like if you have a voltage across a resistor, doesn't that mean that if I then just hook the thing up between that resistor, like the resistor's not like a power source, but like the voltage between this resistor is this thing. So if I just add and I can measure it, right? Like I put a voltmeter, so I measure there's 1 volt between these, which means if I put a load across that thing, it should be, it should feel 1 volt. I don't know for sure.
This is like the IR compensation lab,
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's like when you add a resistance into it, the voltage across, you measure the voltage across different points and you find out what it is. So okay, so there's some trial and error here, possibly some intelligence if you had more than we do, but trial and error at the very least. Adding some resistors and possibly doing things like that could, in theory, reduce the delivered values to closer to what you're looking to do. So that's so yes, it should be possible, but it'll require you to figure some things out. So
yeah. I hope Zeus, you that was very helpful. Or Lucas.
I think it's Lucas.
Let's see.
Zap your way to victory.
Yeah, zap your way to victory. I mean, I guess an aquatic lithium battery won't be too dangerous if it.
This is a definitely lower density kind of a thing. Lower power, lower density. The aqueous limits that, which is why lithium-ion batteries in general are non-aqueous, of course. But 0 to 1 volt with 10 microamps is pretty low. Low danger, I guess, whatever. But that's highlights why you are concerned, for instance, about pumping 40 milliamps through it. You're at, whatever, 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude difference, and that's not ideal, right? So
okay.
So hopefully that's something. For you. It's the best that we can think there, I suppose. But anyway, Saktipada, I think.
Yes.
At IIT Bombay is next.
So he says a perfect way of ring test of cyclic voltammetry experiment for homogeneous copper-based molecular catalysts. How to choose potential.
It's kind of like just determining the potential window, maybe. I mean,
it's
a general question, like you've talked about a handful of times.
So generally speaking, this is my famous how to choose the potential window.
I also just want to note before we continue that Lucas has just said that I nailed it about his name and surname.
Oh, good.
And I don't think it was Zeus. Thank you very much. It was Lucas.
Oh, it was Lucas.
Or I almost. Now I lost it, the last name, but I hope I tried to do it justice. I like languages a lot, so I appreciate the feedback, Lucas. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're talking about molecular
Yes,
calculus.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was very proud of myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, number one thing. I've actually changed my mind a little bit about how to do
Oh,
this.
interesting.
First thing to do is actually do the OCP. So determine the open circuit potential. So you'll give this time, and then you'll have potential, and then usually when you put this thing into solution, it takes a while for it to like kind of steady out, but then it kind of flattens, and you have a rough idea of what the potential is. So right off the bat, let's say this was like plus 1 volt. Let's just call it plus 1 volt. That means that at plus 1 volt, no current flows in your system. That's what this means. So if it's anything, where do you start doing your experiment? You should start, if I start my CV here, this should be plus 1 volt. Because that's where the current is going to be 0, right? This is current. So now you need to think a little bit about like, all right, what is the oxidation state of your copper-based molecular homogeneous molecular catalyst? So I kind of think that, well, if it's copper, ideally you have some semblance of what the oxidation state is. But let's say when you put this thing, it started lower than 1 volt, and then it went up to 1 volt. So that means, let's see, if it was going more positively, I'm trying to think, let's see. So if it started off a little bit less than it, and there was current that was driving it here, then it seems like as it was equilibrating, some negative, it was maybe getting some negative, maybe a negative current or something like that, or positive current to get it to be higher to a positive potential. But what you should start doing either way is you should start sweeping just a little bit off of plus minus 1 volt. Just sweep here, maybe 500 millivolts. You go an extra 500 millivolts this way, you go minus 500 millivolts this way. And then you look for features. If it appears that it's flat, there's nothing happening, then you can extend out a little bit further. Maybe you see a little something here, maybe you see a little something there, maybe it's a little bit too much. So you say, all right, I'm only going to keep this at 0 at best. But then at some point you should observe like, oh, when I scan, I see something like this, and now I know where my redox feature is. And of course, if this was, if plus 1 was here, then I know that, oh, I get oxidation at plus 1.3 or something like that, 1.3 volts. And so that's how you would kind of test it. You'd start at the open circuit potential, and then you'd sweep positive or negatively if you had any idea or semblance about what is the oxidation state of your copper molecular catalyst. Is it in the 2+ state? Is it in the 3+ state? Are you doing a reduction? Maybe it's the 3+ state. It's much easier for you to do a reduction than an oxidation. So perhaps you would, you'd actually scan negatively from plus 1 volt, right? So maybe you would do something like that to induce the reduction reaction. But yeah, that is the general way of going about it. You just slowly test out and expand the potential window from the OCP to see like, all right, where do you start seeing things? And then, and yeah, it's a little bit of trial and error, but that's probably the best way to go about it. Start from OCP, and then, oh, I think it's going to be negative. Oh, I think it's going to be positive. And then you start, doing cyclical voltammograms in small potential windows as you expand it until you have a much clearer idea. Oh, this is where the redox feature is. So you don't like destroy something. But it's a homogeneous catalyst, so it's not usually you can end up sweeping pretty far and then get the information that you ultimately need. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's keep going. Pankaj is asking like about the previous question about biosensors, working on thread-based biosensors, and wanted to know our perspective on thread-based biosensing as an emerging biosensing platform. And truthfully, I don't know very much about it. Go on to say that many researchers have used cotton thread as a working electrode after various modifications, as is a cost-effective biosensor and more flexible compared to traditional electrodes like ITO and plastic SPs. Yeah. I mean, that may be the case. I have not personally used cotton or thread-based biosensors. I did a very quick search, and it looks like people are using it for like wearable sensors, which means you can only look at things. I'm assuming you're only able to look at things that come off the skin, so like sweat and stuff like that. So I think it depends on what the market is and what people are interested in. But I don't know enough about it. In principle, it's like, oh, if I have a cotton thread, I dip it into my bioactive thing, I just let it dry, boom, and that's it. That sounds very easy from like a manufacturing perspective, and then as you said, more flexible in terms of wearability and use than ITO or plastic SPEs. Yeah, definitely that might be the case. But truthfully, I don't know. The basic screen print electrode with aptamers is something I have a little bit of familiarity with, but thread based is something new.
Yeah, I have no knowledge. I have nothing to add. I don't know why I'm here.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Mushake has a nice comment. Mushake said, I want to thank you both. I finished my electrochem thesis and managed to do well thanks to these streams. All right.
Yeah, we've been through this before a couple times. I'll send you offline my my bank account information. So it's 10% for the first 2 years of your career, and then after that, it's 5% in perpetuity. So I'll expect the royalty payments coming. So thank you very much. This was not free. I'm not sure where you got that impression. No, congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. Congrats.
Yeah.
That's wonderful news. So
Very
yeah,
good.
we're very happy to have been helpful in any way that we could be. So
Yes.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. That's great.
I feel like one of those Shark Tank guys. Like, all right, it's I'll
Mr.
give you,
Wonderful.
yeah, I'll give you $100,000 for 10% of your career, and I want 2% in perpetuity from your paycheck.
Forever.
Forever. Yeah,
something
I have
like
to. I have to get my money back.
Yeah,
which,
that's
and there was no money involved in any of this, but that's what it
Yeah.
should be.
That'd
That'd be amazing. No, I'm
would
just
be
kidding.
amazing.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay, let's see. Yeah.
I think this might be the last set of questions that we get for today.
Well, is it fulminated HG? There's
Yeah,
a question here.
fulminated mercury, I guess.
Fulminated mercury. That's an interesting name.
Yeah.
Is there any reason my CV and dichloromethane has a larger peak separation for ferrocene? I tried doubling the electrolyte concentration. It didn't help. Yeah, because dichloromethane has a huge impedance by itself as a solvent. Like 10 times what acetonitrile has, give or take. I was just checking some data I had done like a long time ago. Actually, it was more like last year or the year before, so not too long ago. I was testing some products, with some local research labs help, and testing them in various solvents, acetonitrile, water, THF, DMSO, and dichloromethane. And as an example, some of the results, I'm not going to, there's nothing worth showing here. I have some like uncompensated resistance results. And for instance, in acetonitrile at a pretty relatively high concentration, I would guess, I don't remember precisely what I used for like a supporting electrolyte, but I used probably 0.1 or 0.5 molar, like TBAPF6 or something like that. Right. And I was getting, 50 to 70 ohms in acetonitrile. So pretty low, like water. Acetonitrile is great because of that reason. It's very low impedance, similar to aqueous systems, or relatively speaking. Dichloromethane, like 500 ohms, so almost 10 times. Now THF, for instance, was like a kilo ohm. It was the highest. THF is a nightmare.
Yeah.
But dichloromethane is tough. Okay. It has its own really high intrinsic impedance. So you are probably necessarily going to have some troubles here. A very high uncompensated resistance that is simply unavoidable because of the solvent itself will cause problems like peak separation, which is you can try IR compensation either after the fact by correcting the voltage or during the experiment if your potentiostat permits it. You can select, for example, to run IR compensation at 90% of the whatever the value is, and that will hopefully bring the peaks closer together and clarify some of that. Or as I said, you can correct afterwards. But I just suspect that it has to do with dichloromethane itself. You're probably never going to get a really low uncompensated resistance in dichloromethane. It's just not possible. The solvent itself is tough to work with for that reason. So that I suspect is not your fault, right? It's an intrinsic property of the solvent.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any more to add, but that's
No, I mean,
seems the most likely culprit to me.
yeah, most likely culprit. Even doubling the electrolyte concentration won't
You're never going to
help.
get it that low.
Yeah,
Dichloromethane's just a pain in the butt.
It's just
It is.
that's just what it is.
Mhm.
So the next question, I'm not so sure will be able to answer it or not. I'd have to think about it. Hey, I have a question. Not sure if it's related to electrochemistry, but please explain what is electromagnetic field. Like what does it mean molecularly?
What is it like? What's moving, right? I don't know. Is it electrons are arranging themselves in a field? I guess sort of free electrons or something. It's kind of bizarre.
What is an electromagnetic field from a molecular perspective? I mean, an electromagnetic field is a macroscopic property that we observe based on the atoms that we're kind of looking at. So electromagnetic field, the way I think about it is electromagnetic fields exist. Or no, I thought Free University had a follow up about that. Electromagnetic fields exist due to, I mean, they kind of exist from like a physics perspective. It's about like charged particles. If a particle or something has charge or a molecule has charge, so a negative or a positive charge, you can almost think of it as like, oh, well, it exhibits like a small magnetic field. It has a pull and a push, associated to another charged species. So on a molecular level, that's kind of what it is. And electromagnetic fields exist in a way macroscopically because of like potential differences. The energy that's required to move a charge through a field. So if the electromagnetic field is high, and you have a charged particle and you try to move it through, it has some energy required to move it through that field. But like I don't know if I can pinpoint it. It's like I'm trying to think if there's a way to pinpoint it to like a thing in a molecule that's like, oh, because this molecule has charge. Metals, for example, don't have, things that are conductors don't have electric fields in them. Like the electric field can exist outside of them. And that's because you have charged species inside the magnetic field, but it's always able to balance that charge with a free electron. Like it can move electrons wherever it needs to go to balance out the quote, like electromagnetic field that would otherwise be generated, like the shielding effect. So I don't know if that helps with your answer. They exist, the electromagnetic fields in a way exist because of like excess charge. So if you have a positive charge or a negative charge, literally just a proton and an electron, if they're imbalanced and you have like two electrons and one proton, well, that's going to create a charge imbalance, and that charge is going to have a pull or a push depending on the charge. But then when you expand upon it, you know, a bajillion times, because we have macroscopic things, they manifest themselves as fields instead of just, oh, I have a charge and I can only pull an atom, that's right next to me. Well, if you have bajillions of these things, it can pull things that are much farther away. There's also concepts like paramagnetism. If the electron is all oriented in one type of spin, it has like paramagnetic. Well, that's more magnetism. So, but that is electromagnetism in a way. So, I don't know if that was helpful. I don't know if you have any other thing to add.
I mean,
like,
my answer was going to be
molecularly.
much simpler than yours, which
Oh.
just makes sense. I'm the engineer. I just think like thing moves.
Yeah.
You know, you're like chemistry theory more.
Y-
Mine's more
y-
just general. Like I don't molecularly, like you said, it's like there's charged species. There's no field inside of a metal. There isn't a semiconductor, but like there's no
Mhm.
the field itself is just like like ions or free electrons between the 2 points of the field or whatever
Yeah.
are moving. I guess I don't something like that. Like molecularly, what I'm trying to like talk
Yeah.
like describe, right? Like there's a field that is pushing charge in one direction. That's what a field is doing. It's like it's causing the flow of positive or negative in one direction or the other.
Mhm.
And so something is physically moving. It's either free electrons on a metal or a conductor or a semiconductor somewhere somehow is moving. Like
Mhm.
free electrons moving is charge moving. It's current, you know, whatever.
Mhm.
Or ions in solution. If it's a solution base, if it's a field with a solution base as in electrochemistry, like a chloride ion moving is moving in a field, and that like is or happening as a result of the field probably, but like
Yeah.
it's something like that. I don't that would be my very simplistic attempt at describing it, quote unquote,
Yeah.
molecularly.
Quote molecularly.
Yeah, it's a cool question
That's a
actually,
good
because it's
question.
like I often think in this way. I would say, um, you know, what is really actually happening? You
Yeah,
know, like when we
yeah.
talked about Schottky stuff, we
Yes.
talked about semiconductors. Like what's actually happening? Oh, the field is the space charge regions inside the thing, and there's
Yeah.
a charge separate. Like just what's happening physically is a good question.
Yeah.
So that's a cool question actually. There's a handful of other things, but we're sort of at the time here. But as a general answer for university, I don't have an answer for your last two questions. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know what happens to gas evolution when there's a magnetic field of 0.2 Tesla. And no, I'm not tremendously familiar with like nuclear reactions at HD loaded cathodes. I don't have answers for
Oh,
you.
they're talking about
Cold fusion,
which is
was a failed experiment.
Yeah. Well, it was a failed experiment that got into politics. That there's
What
a
years
part,
did that happen?
Hmm?
What years did that happen? Was that
Well, at least from here, he's saying 1989. So it was a long time ago.
I thought it was in like the 50s or 60s, maybe.
Oh no, it was
okay.
it was earlier than that. But it was
Low energy nuclear reactions.
yeah. The problem was that, you know, he did things politically that were bad, and but as a result, it shut down even the possibility of exploring what may have happened.
Oh,
And it
I
was
don't know a
just
lot
like-
of those details, to be honest. I don't know any of these the political details. All I know is that we sometimes make fun of cold fusion as like,
Yes.
oh, it's gonna make it. It's gonna be the next technology, and it was like a
Oh yeah.
failed,
Yeah.
you know, whatever kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I actually have no knowledge whatsoever of what you're talking about. So
Oh,
admittedly,
okay.
I know much less. We've joked about it, and I know generally why it's kind of funny. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like in a very goofy, offhand way. But
Mhm.
I don't know any of the real history behind it, or the political implications.
Oh.
I don't know that 1989 is when the Soviet Union collapsed, roughly in that range. So I don't know if it had something to do with like politically what was happening at the time globally. Like I don't know if that's
sorry.
I don't know.
When I say politically, sorry, I meant like science politics.
science politics.
So
not like global politics.
Yeah, not global
Okay.
politics. Basically what happened in a nutshell was that Fleischmann, he told the public, like the press,
Mhm.
about the discovery before it was like peer reviewed.
Oh, this is
And-
like the Theranos thing too, like the
exactly.
that company that was lying about their
oh yeah, blood
glucose
testing.
probes or blood
Yeah.
testing probes, and it was all a lie. And the
Mhm.
megalomaniac lady's in jail now. And
Yes.
she still won't apparently admit that she lied. She's
Really?
yeah, she's a psychopath. It's crazy. It's like you've been caught, you're in prison.
Yeah.
You could just say like, yeah, you know,
I'm
I
sorry.
I I was stealing people's money.
Yeah.
I got caught. It's fine. It's like, no. You're still innocent.
Yeah.
You got it, lady. Okay, whatever.
Oh,
I heard that the other day. Someone was like, yeah, she still like maintains her innocence or something. I'm like, okay, whatever. She's a psychopath or a sociopath. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
She like tried to be exactly like Steve Jobs. Like that was a thing.
Yes.
She like mimicked his mannerisms and everything, his vocal patterns, and she's a total.
She just wanted to be Steve Jobs.
Yeah, and she tried to cheat her way, and whatever.
Yeah.
She's a total sociopath. These things are interesting.
Oh, they're absolutely interesting.
I need to learn more about Fleischmann and the cold fusion thing. That was the science. That
was kind of the science thing.
Whatever.
He went to the public about the discovery before he got it like peer reviewed and talked to the scientific community about it. He just told them, "I discovered this thing," or "We discovered this thing," and everyone just like jumped on it because they thought it was like nonsense.
Interesting. It's like the ether thing, right? They thought that the ether existed. They did tests to try to prove it exists. They ended up proving a vacuum exists.
Yeah.
That's real science.
Yeah, that's real science.
I have a hypothesis. I guess I was wrong.
And then they move on.
Interesting.
But the fact that like because of that problem, nobody ever decided to like pursue cold fusion is like,
it might still be a
reasonable thing of taking like deuterium and putting it into platinum, and maybe it's just like, oh, you actually need like ultra pure palladium or something.
The slight difference in energy is harnessable, right?
Yeah,
basically.
But we just cut it out completely
because of one liar.
That's
too bad.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
that's
cool.
all.
It is interesting.
That's cool. Well, now I feel enlightened after like 10 years of having very vague knowledge of this. Like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. Yeah, squash the world-changing chemistry. Exactly. We collectively destroyed innovation. But these things matter. Integrity. This is my parting thought. You ready? There's like parting thoughts of the day. I'm sorry for the
next like 4 weeks, because for those of you who are paying attention, we're going to be out because we're running workshops. We got 2 workshops,
some vacation,
1 week after another. There's 4th of July. It won't be until July 11th.
July 11th is our next live
July
stream.
11th will be the next live stream.
So I hope everybody has a good time before then. But
yes,
until July 11th, my parting thought is that if the sacrifice that we have to make as a scientific community is that we will never have real cold fusion, but we keep our integrity and our soul, I'm okay with it. Is that deep?
I think that's deep. I think your integrity is very important. That's a great, like, long-lasting, like, important thing is your integrity.
Yes.
Can't do that.
We are social creatures, and we rely on each other to be honest, and especially in the world of science, this is why, in theory, even though it can be gamed in different ways, the peer review process is meant to weed out the good from the bad, or at least checks and balances on each other. We have to be better than that as a scientific community. We just have to be, because we have a lot on our collective shoulders to try to advance energy technologies and just technologies in general.
Mm-hmm.
We are the future of the human species. That's quite grandiose. But anyway, we'll leave it at that very minor point right there.
Minor point.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, apologies for the few last minute questions here.
Yeah.
We do try to end this at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I know everybody's in different locations, and perhaps your time is a little different, but we'll call it here. And as Alex said, we are going to be out for at least 3 weeks or so. So July 11th appears to be on the calendar, the next date that Alex and I are still in the same country together, and we will do this again.
Yes.
So until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of June and several weeks and everything. And we'll see you next time. So take care, everybody.
Bye.